What's going on? It's Trending Story. If it's your first time here and you want to find out new facts that will definitely make you smarter and more well informed, make sure to subscribe and active the notifications bell so you don't miss anything.
An amazing story about how a man sitting on the bank of a fast river saw something strange in the water. This is something that will change his life forever. After fighting Igor Sergeyevich with his wife Lilia, he immediately went out to wander and immediately went to the river that he loved in the forest to sit there, calm down. He felt calm as soon as he seemed to walk through the woods. The atmosphere was lovely and the air was fresh. When the man reached his favorite river, he sat on the rocks and stayed there, watching the waters running through it, making loud noises when they collided with the rocks. The man was holding stones in his hand, throwing them in the water, and listening to the sound they made when they touched the water. The tide on that day was very strong, but Igor was not afraid. Rather, he found it very exciting. He wants to forget what happened with his wife in any way because she became unbearable and caused problems all the time for her to quarrel with him. Meanwhile, the man recalled an incident that occurred to him and his friend when he was 12 years old. A childhood friend named Volodya liked to always come to the river with Igor to swim in the river and fish. One day, the two of them came as usual to the river to swim and found that the river was full and the current was strong. Although Igor advised Volodya not to enter the river and warned him of that, the boy insisted on swimming and jumped into the water. Igor was waiting for his friend to appear, but this did not happen as Volodya drowned in the river after hitting large rocks. Igor hurried to the village to ask for help from the people. A group of men came and they immediately entered the river and took the boy out. Volodya suffered several bruises and almost lost his life, but fortunately these men brought him to the hospital quickly, and there the doctors managed to stop the severe bleeding and miraculously saved his life. The boy suffered fractures in various parts of his body and required his transfer to the hospital in the capital, Moscow, and since that time, no news of him has emerged. When Igor went one day to Volodya's grandmother and asked about him, she told him that he was in a wheelchair because he had sustained a permanent disability after that accident. He felt Igor's guilt when he learned what happened with his close friend, as he blamed himself a lot for not preventing him from entering the river running that day. Igor sighed when he remembered the events of that story and shed tears, then kept thinking about his friend who had been absent from him for 20 years, and how he dealt with his disability that destroyed his life. Igor got down from the rock and put his feet in the running water to wash them, and kept thinking about a place to spend that night, as he did not want to see the face of his evil wife on that day, at least. Suddenly, he heard a shout coming from between those rocks, as if someone were calling for help. When the young man tracked that sound, he found a kitten stuck between the rocks and his front legs injured. Igor remembered his friend Volodya immediately when he saw the poor cat flopping between the rocks, that he pulled him so hard that he was able to get him out of that trap at which he fell. The young man was still surprised that there had been a cat in that place and kept checking it. Igor noticed that this animal was not like other cats, but he thought that it might be a rare family cat and decided to help him. The little animal was shivering from the cold, which made the young man take off his coat, wrap it in it, and then suddenly return to the house to try to treat his wounds. When Igor arrived at the house, he found that the entrance door was closed, that he took out the key to open the door, that he found that his wife had changed the lock, and then he sighed and stayed at the door. The poor cat was getting worse. Igor does not have relatives in the village, nor does he have friends, so his last friend was Volodya, who disappeared and did not return. The man tried to call his wife and told her that he had brought an animal and he had to help him, but she asked him to leave immediately and not disturb her because that house belongs to her and she will call the police if it continues to harass her. It was very cold, which made Igor shiver with the cold, and despite this, he refused to take his coat off the little animal. Igor decided to go to the house of his grandmother, Volodya, as she knew him well from childhood, and that Igor used to visit her sometimes to check on her and ask her about her. When the young man got to the grandmother's house, he knocked on the door and waited. The grandmother, who lives alone in the house, came and asked who was driving, and when she knew that he was Igor, she opened the door for him and invited him to enter. The grandmother found that the young man was shivering while he was holding his coat in his hand, which astonished her, and when you asked Igor, he told her that he had found the injured cat in the river. When Grandma took a look at the little animal, she found that it was not a cat as Igor had thought, but rather a small leopard. The young man was surprised when he learned that he had been carrying a leopard in his hand for that long, but he asked the grandmother to help him treat the wounded animal. The grandmother made hot tea for Igor. Then she went and brought some herbs, then put them in hot water and gave them to the little leopard to drink. The grandmother brought a box of medical equipment, washed the leopard's wounds with the help of Igor, then bandaged it and left the animal resting near the stove. The grandmother and Igor kept talking about their lives. The young man told her about what was happening with his wife, who had become unbearable. Then the grandmother told him, blaming him, that she advised him several times to divorce her because it was not appropriate for him. But he didn't, and this time she offered to divorce her, urging him to start his life over with another woman. The grandmother agreed that Igor would live with her in her small house, and she kept taking care of that animal until it recovered. For his part, Igor was helping the grandmother with housework, and he goes with her to the field to help her cultivate the land and reap ripe crops, which is what the grandmother appreciated. The grandmother told Igor that popular stories in the village in which she lives says that the person who helps the cheetah and does not mistreat him, his dreams come true and his life becomes happy. She asked him to dream about what he wanted, and it will come true over time. Meanwhile, the young man remembered his friend Volodya and wished him to stand on his feet again and to meet him one day. Months later, the grandmother received a call from Moscow and told her that Volodya was able to stand on his feet, a news that pleased her a lot and shocked Igor, who did not think that his wish was fulfilled and that what the grandmother said was not nonsense. The cheetah has grown up protecting the grandmother's house, as well as helping her and Igor with the housework. He was obedient, quiet, and did everything they asked him to do. For his part, the young man abstained from visiting his wife Lilia, and he prepared divorce papers in order to finally separate from her. There was Volodya, and he was standing on his feet. Igor hugged his friend tightly and kept asking about his condition. Then after that, Volodya embraced his grandmother. Volodya knew that Igor had come to live with his grandmother, and she told him on the phone when she spoke to him, and the grandmother knew that Volodya was coming to visit her, but she refused to tell Igor and she wanted it to be a surprise. Volodya did not come alone. He had his beautiful younger sister with him, who decided to visit her grandmother. The young woman was very impressed by Igor, and they exchanged glances of admiration from the first meeting they had together, as he fell in love with each other and later married, and they stayed with the grandmother, accompanied by the cheetah who stayed with them to protect them.
Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video in social networks. We'll be right back to you as fast as we can.